Here we're talking about shifting graphs. Here's a graph. And when I say shift, what I mean is exactly this, shift. So we can shift to the right, or we can shift to the left, or we can shift up, or we can shift down. What we're interested here is what's the change in the actual function. Each of these graphs corresponds to a function, and we'd like to know how to re-express the original function and get the new function whose graph corresponds to the new graph. So here's a function f of x. Now suppose I want to shift this function up. Let's suppose I want to shift it up by 2 units. That means I want to push it up. I'm going to push every value up by 2 units. So here I'll go up 2 units, and everywhere along here I'll go up by 2 units. Okay, up 2, up 2, up 2. Okay, so I think you get the idea. So what does the graph look like? It looks sort of like this, the new graph. Now what does the new function look like? Well, every value of f of x, so here's the height. That height is f of x if this is the particular x we're looking at. And I've just added 2 to that height. So if this height is f of x, the total height from here to here is f of x plus 2. So the new graph is f of x plus 2. What if instead of adding 2, I subtracted 2? What if I took f of x and I subtracted 2? Well, I'd be subtracting 2 from the height of the graph at each point, so I'd be going down by 2. It would shift down by 2. So shifting down by 2 would give me a graph that sort of looks like this. Okay, that's the effect of shifting when you're adding or subtracting a number from the actual function. But what about if we want to shift from left to right? Well, that's a little bit different. So let's look at shifting from left to right. Okay, so here's a function. Okay, I'm going to call this the graph of g. The graph of t will be my independent variable, and I want to shift to the left or right. So let's say I want to shift by 2 units to the right. So everything's going to move over to the right by 2 units. Okay, the new graph is going to look something like so I just join the points of the arrows. There's the new function. Now, how do I relate the function whose graph is given by the green curve with the original function whose graph is given by the white? Let's clean this up a little bit. Okay, well, how did I get the green function? Well, let's look at this particular value. Well, let's think of this as my particular t. To know what this height is, what I have to do is look back 2 units to the corresponding height for g. So g is the graph of the original white function, and now I want to know what happens, what's the green. So that happens, that height corresponds to the value of g at t minus 2. So this value is actually the same as g of t minus 2. So in fact, the green graph is the graph of g of t minus 2. Okay, you can do the same argument at every point, get the same consequence that g of t minus 2, its graph is exactly this green function. Okay, the general rule is the graph of, say, g of t minus k, or f of x minus k, is the graph of g of t, but shifted k units to the right. So shifting to the right corresponds to subtracting off your constant. In this case, the constant was actually 2. If you want to shift to the left, well, then you change the sign of the constant. Okay, so the rule for shifting to the left is as follows. The graph of g of t plus k is the graph of the original function g of t shifted t units to the left. Okay, so shifting to the left corresponds to adding a positive number, that positive number that you want to shift by. Shifting to the right means subtracting the positive number you want to shift by. Let's look at an application of this latter rule to a particular example. Okay, there's the rule. Let's suppose we have the following example. We're given a graph of a function. Instead of calling it g, let's call it h. It might be given as h. And the independent variable in this case may be x. But the same rule applies. It'd be the graph of h of x shifted t units to the left is the same as the graph of h of x plus k. So now, the question asks, draw graph or sketch of h of x plus 3. Okay, well, what the rule says is that if I add 3, then I should be shifting to the left by, in particular, 3 units. So I want to shift everything to the left. So we can try to draw that, sketch that here. Okay, it's an imprecise sketch, but for most of these problems, you're only going to be asked to identify what happens.